Calling the March 12th Personnel and Finance Committee to order. I need approval of the agenda first up. We have a motion and support. Agenda is approved. Move on to item 3, public comment. Public comment, last chance. No public comment. Moving on to item 4, committee items. Item A, we need approval of the minutes from February 12th. We have a motion and support. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Those opposed the same. Passes unanimously. Item 4B, the sheriff, undersheriff is here to talk about patrol car purchases. Welcome, Chris.
Good morning. So I'm here before you. We had a number of vehicles requested in the budgetary process in the Capital Improvement Fund. Those dollar amounts are in the CIP. As you can see, 3 fully marked patrol vehicles, 3 Ford Explorers or Interceptors, and 3 Dodge Chargers. The bid prices through my deal are listed there. The bid price for the Ford Explorer utilities with the number of options that we get, key to like, ready for door package, etc. Obviously, we've been through this before. We know that the vehicles receive a high level of use. Typically, one of the concerns is what vehicles are going out. Again, if you go to the very back page, we can see 6 vehicles that we propose putting out of service or turning in for auction in exchange for the 6. The one difference that we do have this year that I'll touch on for just a minute is with the acquisition of the new patrol boats 2 years ago. Those are lighter weight Lund aluminum boats, so a Explorer, which has a towing capability, would have the full ability to tow those. As you all know, that the liaison officers conduct the Marine patrols in the summer, so they're in the schools in the school year, and then they're in the Marine patrol in the summer. So we have a Chevrolet truck parked at the boat barn. Although it does have low miles, 92,000, it is a 1997. We dedicate a lot of maintenance to it just because it sits for 90% of its life and then gets used very sparingly. So we are suggesting that we turn that vehicle in. It could probably fetch a fair amount of money through the county's auction, be dedicated back. And then with that, we're going to basically put all of these Ford Explorers or Ford Interceptors into the school liaison officers with the towing capabilities so they can have the same vehicle they're assigned throughout the year. It has the capability of towing boats. It's fully equipped, fully marked, has all the items they need in it because we have run into the situation that, so if they're on Marine patrol in the summer and it's a rainy, thunderstormy day, they're not going to go out on the lake. They're going to go out on patrol and do items. That way they don't have to switch vehicles. They have everything they need. Those are their assigned vehicles. It seems to be a better solution than letting a vehicle sit for 90% of its life and then dedicate a few $1,000s to seals and things like that. And just real quick, while we're talking about maintenance, I failed to mention this in the year-end report, but obviously Dan Prowl, our only mechanic, retired at the end of last year. We initiated a contract with JC Dot. They're going to be doing all of our maintenance. They have been since November. Maintenance, they're going to be purchasing all the needed equipment, etc. That solution is going very well. We obviously did not replace the FT, the mechanic, and we're using JC Dot services. And we just had a meeting last week. That's working out very well between us, so we're very happy about that. Now, I did just come up prior to this meeting about the new purchasing policy and the requirement for POs. As you recall, vehicles used to be their own item under the old purchasing policy and required subcommittee approval. Here, the new purchasing policy simply lists dollar amounts, and we'd be glad to issue POs for these to the respective vendors. Obviously, Signature Ford for the collective amount, and I have Smith Camp Dodge, but that's not accurate. They were actually bought out by LaFontaine earlier this year. So LaFontaine Dodge would be the 2 My Deal dealers. How the board decides to go about that, we will follow that course either way. Typically, a PO is issued by the finance department. I do not have authority within the system to issue a PO, so we work with the finance department to create that PO. And essentially what you're doing is you're taking the dollar amount out of that specific line item in that budget, so the capital improvement budget for sheriff vehicles, and you're going to issue a PO, and you're going to assign a vendor to that PO, so Smith Camp or Signature, and then you're going to assign that dollar amount that will be coming from that line item to that vendor. That's essentially what a PO is, obviously identified by a certain number. So we'd be happy to do that and work with finance to create that. How the board wishes to proceed is obviously their pleasure.
Thank you, Chris. questions, discussion? Commissioner Elwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a number of issues with the request, and I've been, and I'll first say, Chris, our Undersheriff, I appreciate your detail-oriented person. My comments are not aimed at you, not aimed at the Sheriff Department. It's really at the process here and our board policies and procedures. And for me, it started when the conversation came up of this 2017 Explorer that apparently is assigned to the sheriff. And I took the time to talk to Mike about it, and Mike took the time to have Rick put together a list of vehicles assigned to the Sheriff's Department, and that particular vehicle is on the list. Included in the packet that I've got that I've given to committee members here is the invoice for that particular 2017 Explorer. And if I have the information right that I pulled up from board docs, it looks like we approved $26,944 for the purchase of two Interceptors, which I believed at the time were for patrol. I had no idea that we were buying it for the sheriff, and that was on February 1st of 2017. If you look further in the packet I gave you, this was put together, I think, by Rick through Mike. There's an invoice there on 5/8 of 2017 for $30,359, which is not the amount we approved. I don't always believe that what's in the newspaper is accurate, but in a recent article, they spoke with Under Sheriff Kuhl, and he talked about that $30,359, and the article reads plus $19.52 in trim leveler options, which takes, by my math, that amount to $32,311 for that 2017 Explorer, which I believe the sheriff is driving. I don't have any problem the sheriff having a car assigned to him or a take-home one, generally speaking. Same thing with the undersheriff, but when I go on my deal and I can find more appropriate, in my opinion, administrative cars like an Impala or a Taurus or an Interceptor sedan that range in price from $19,000 up to $22,000, money matters. I don't know why we would need an administrator driving an all-wheel drive $32,000 vehicle. And I'm upset as a commissioner about not knowing that that particular one was for the sheriff. If you pull up the document, you don't see that anywhere in it. So as part of that process, Mike, again, had Rick Shealy put a list together of all the vehicles by the Sheriff's Department or that the Sheriff's Department has. That list is attached here. And I've highlighted some of the issues that I have with it, including, I think, which is the fact that a number of the vehicles that are owned by the county were not passed on to HR for insurance purposes. Mike has assured me that we have blanket insurance coverage, so it shouldn't matter as far as liability goes. But I think it does matter because they should have been notified. There's notes, as you can see in there, and I've highlighted my important parts about missing information on vehicles. There's one there that it's believed it has a typographical error in the VIN because we don't know where it came from. It says no information on this particular one. And I also lay some of the blame with us commissioners, or with me, I guess I'll just speak for myself. Our policies, all of us should be aware of, and our policies, as the undersheriff had just mentioned, include the requirement for purchase orders. And in my employment, we use BS&A software the same as we do in this county. And as a department head, I get purchase orders. I'm allotted up to $500. If it's above that, it has to go to the supervisor for approval. And I guess I'm hopeful that that same program is what we use here and that everybody else in the county uses that because it's a great way to track purchases. And I'm surprised our auditors haven't caught that we're not using POs. And I don't blame anybody here but us because we're the ones that oversee this. Purchase orders are required. I've included a portion of the purchasing policies, which all the way from $10,000 up, well, above $5,000, a purchase order is required, and that gets reviewed by Mike. I had an issue with titles on where they were, but Mike has clarified they are, in fact, in the charge of the administrator's office, as they should be. So I'm not prepared to even vote on this today. I think we would be wise to give all these issues to Mike. I personally don't think the undersheriff should have to spend his time building vehicle lists. I've been here long enough to know that Rick Shealy used to do that, and did a very good job of it. As we look through this list of, well, the list on the request, the same as the one from February, they talk about 8 vehicles, I think that was a February 17 request, coming out of service and being auctioned. There's no VIN numbers for them. I'd like to see a list as a request is brought forward to purchase a vehicle. Give us a list of the vehicles they got. Tell us which ones you're getting rid of so that next time we can see that they're gone. I don't know that that's happened. I don't know who has take-home vehicles. There's a policy that I think I've attached to this group that says the administrator has the authority to decide who has take-home vehicles, and I think HR is supposed to keep that list. So Mike has the authority to decide who gets a take-home vehicle. I mean, really, I don't care who it is, just know who it is so that we know, because I don't know. I don't want to read in the paper who has take-home vehicles. I want Mike to figure that out and make sure that we know so we're not reading it there. So I'm not saying that new vehicles should never be bought. I just think now is not the right time to do this. We need to have a better process in place, and we need to know we're following our own rules and policies on vehicles. It's all money. It's all about money. It's about responsibility and transparency. And I just am not ready to vote for this, and if a motion is made, I'll be voting no on it. And it's, again, I appreciate your detail-oriented and want to support you in the Sheriff Department, but we just need to hold off on this for now, in my opinion.
Law enforcement vehicles are not registered. Law enforcement vehicles are not registered. All vehicles that we have are titled to the County of Jackson. All the titles and dealer paperwork is held here on file in the finance office. You will see that. Can I take a moment to address some of Commissioner Elwell's comments? Would that? Yes, they all have plates that start with 38 star something, okay? So I think what you're asking about is the vehicle list. And I don't know what vehicle list that you have. I don't know where it came from. But we have multiple lists. Facilities is given one with a complete list of vehicles that we have. JC Dot now has one for their invoicing purposes and their fleet purposes. And then, of course, we coordinate with HR, who insures the vehicles through MMRMA. So when these lists are asked for, typically at the end of the year, typically the end of the calendar year or fiscal year, you have to keep in mind that, so we order vehicles. Let's say that you guys were to approve these today. We move forward and order the vehicles. We won't take delivery on the vehicles until probably August, and then there'll probably be another month to 2 months of upfitting. So when those lists are asked for, and we've addressed this with HR and MMRMA before, do you want all vehicles that we will be driving in 2018, or do you want all vehicles we currently own? They said, we need all vehicles that you currently own. That's why you have vehicles on that list with no plates, because we have just received them. They're in the process of being upfitted. They're in the process of being deployed, but they're not actually on the road yet. MMRMA's analogy is, look, that car could be at your upfitter and a beam drop on it, and we're going to need to pay for the insurance on it. So you have a complete list of vehicles that we currently own. And then whenever facilities auction those vehicles, they should be taking those out of their list, whether they're, whether there's some confusion there or not. But obviously we have all the vehicles, we have all the VINs. Oftentimes when we have a vehicle, so let's say, we've talked about this before, right? So we have vehicles that are deployed on patrol through the out-county. And typically all of our out-county patrol vehicles are assigned a plate of, or a vehicle number of 38 star, starting with 510 all the way through 519. Townships are given different plate numbers with higher numbers. Once that vehicle is then reaches a certain mileage, typically around 70 or 80,000, it's put out to a township assignment, or maybe a school liaison assignment or something like that that's less intensive. We've talked about that before. The plate will be removed off that. It'll be assigned a new plate, and then it'll be deployed in that with a different vehicle number, and it'll be assigned a different vehicle number. The Secretary of State does not register law enforcement vehicles. You will find that through any jurisdiction. You can't run the plate on our car and it'll say it'll come back to this, because the plate is just a generally non-registered assigned plate. That's why you have vehicles with no plates on them, because we have just received them. MMRMA wants every vehicle that we currently own. update the list a couple times a year, typically send it off to facilities. I will admit in this last year, when we sent the list off for insurance, so this past fall, we had a number of issues with incorrect VINs. There was an individual who was responsible for maintaining that list, one of my subordinates. It was not accurate, it was not complete. I take responsibility for that. I should have gotten those VIN numbers. We did go back, we rehashed those, physically went out and inspected the VIN numbers, corrected those, and sent those to HR for MMRMA's purposes. Because when MMRMA received the list, they kicked it back and said, hey, we have a question about these 5 cars. 2 of them we no longer possessed, had already been submitted for disposal or auction. 3 other ones had an incorrect character in the VIN. We corrected that and sent the list back off to HR. I'm sorry? We send them off to facilities to be auctioned, and once we turn them into facilities, we don't hear anything further. They have a process where they post them online. We did have a complication with a couple vehicles, especially Dodge Chargers this year, which, Nikki, I appreciate your help with this. We discovered that all of our vehicles are fleet keyed, and the Dodges have basically a fob. So if we were to auction that vehicle with the fob, certainly someone would be able to buy that vehicle, walk up to any one of our patrol cars and access it. We realized that, so we pulled 2 of them back, or 3 of them back from auction, had Extreme Dodge change the key fobs and the key codes so that wouldn't happen anymore, and then we need to have a resolution about that going further, perhaps not have our vehicles fleet keyed anymore. Well, we have all the information, and outside of facilities and outside of HR's request for MMRMA, no one's ever requested this information. If somebody has questions, all of you have contacted me many times about things that you wanted to know about or things that you needed information on. I will happily provide anything that you need. There's nothing to hide here. There's nothing to conceal. All of the vehicles are acquired through the county's financial system. All the documentation is there. If there's some question about it, let's have a conversation about it. Everything is what it is. I mean, we have a certain amount of vehicles. They're approved by the board. Obviously, vehicles are very visual things. If there's something the board wants done differently, then let's do that. We can traverse that. But other than this list that went to facilities or HR in the fall that had a couple incorrect characters on the VIN, I'm not sure what else there is to supply. But if there's something the board wants, I'll be happy to do it. So typically what we do when we send that list off, we'll highlight the vehicles that are being turned over to facilities for auction. Typically we'll highlight them in yellow and tell HR that we no longer have these vehicles in our possession. And at what point facilities receives them and auctions them, I don't know. But we made clear that this vehicle is not long for this world. If there's a different process or something that we need to coordinate better with facilities, such as a list on the shared drive or something of that nature, because essentially what we're doing is running an Excel spreadsheet, then let's do that. I'm not opposed to that. Well, again, I don't know what list do you have because we sent a couple different ones off, so we can certainly sit down and review that. Absolutely. Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I gave the undersheriff just now the same packet the committee members have. Can I ask a couple more questions? The undersheriff had volunteered to give us information. So, Chris, the one that bugged me the most was the one from last year. And I'll be up front and tell you that if I had known I was approving spending in excess of $26,000 on an Explorer for the sheriff, I wouldn't have voted for it. But we weren't told that. And again, by my math, it looks like we spent at least $32,311 on it. How do we get to that when the board approved $26,000? If those are accurate figures. And if I'm inaccurate, tell me, please.
No, and those are good questions, and I appreciate that. So let's take a trip back in time real quick here. If you go to that agenda item, actually, let me take a step back. Let me address the dollar figure under the motion requested, because you are right. It is wrong. I accept responsibility for that. The bid prices were supposed to have been gotten to me by an individual with the various options that we need. Instead, I was given the base bid price for the very base vehicle. If you go back to 2016 and look at my request for vehicles, you will see that the Explorers or the utilities were either like $32,995 or just over $30,000. I should have spotted that. I didn't. I will take that whammy. That was
Chris,
my mistake.
I think those figures, I have gone back and looked at those, and I think those figures are inclusive of the $3,000 to equip them, because I've
No.
gone back and looked.
That's correct. That's incorrect. So there's a number of options that we get on the vehicle. We get on the vehicle fleet keyed. There's like 5 or 6 things. And one of those is what's called the Ready for the Road package, which at the suggestion of our upfitter, they suggest that we get that. That's all the pre-wiring done by Ford, so basically the upfitting is much less expensive. They gave us the analogy that, look, we can't do it for what Ford does. You're better off to buy this. So the vehicles we've bought in the past have been right around $30,000. The price goes up a little bit every year. So let's jump to and address the situation about the investigative vehicle. So in 2016, in late 2016, I was assigned a 2008 Chevrolet Impala, had relatively low miles. In the summer or the fall of 2016, the detectives, all 3 who have take-home cars, and if my memory serves me correctly, Commissioner Elwell, you asked me at one meeting last year, maybe a year and a half ago, who all has take-home vehicles, and you knew at that time it was the sheriff, myself, the road patrol captain, and the 3 detectives that took their vehicles home. Either way, the detectives, they had a Chevrolet Impala as well. The engine blew up on that vehicle. I gave them my Chevrolet Impala that was assigned to me, and I took an old patrol car, Dodge Charger, that was coming out of service that had about 140,000 miles. I drove that on an interim basis because I knew that we were budgeted for another investigative vehicle in 2017. If you go into current situation on that agenda item from February 2017, you'll see how I listed that out, and how I talked about we were replacing an investigative vehicle. One of the Ford police utility vehicles will be purchased with a street appearance package. At that time, we were using the analogy of one of the chief's vehicles prices on the My Deal. When the sheriff went to order that vehicle, he discovered that there's a number of deletes on the chief's package or whatever that street appearance package is. And the only package or trim line that was available with the hands-free calling option, since he spends a number of time on the phone, was that trim level that you see. So in BS&A's financial software, you'll see 2 invoices and 2 check payments to Signature Ford, one for the base vehicle model price, because that's how I budget for vehicles. I asked the base vehicle price be listed, so when I go back and look at previous years, if we need to get real lean, I can see what did I pay for the vehicles, what did I pay for the upfitting. The secondary invoice paid from the same fund is for that trim level. Now, going back to that, all of our vehicles are investigative vehicles. We all carry vests. We all carry long guns and a number of equipment to respond to these type of things, just like the incident yesterday. So I don't recall what the conversation was when I came here last year and asked for the purchase of the vehicles, but I've always stood before you. I've always made myself available for questions. And I guess if that wasn't clear, then I apologize for that. But that is all listed out in there, and I want you to understand what the situation was that led to us acquiring that vehicle. You know, you talked about us all dollars and cents, and I appreciate that. I agree very much. I will note that we brought that vehicle budget in last year $15,000 plus under budget.
Chris, I appreciate the additional comments. So you agree that ballpark $32,311 is what we paid for that one particular one we're talking about?
Absolutely. When the sheriff went to order that vehicle, he discovered the issues that I just explained. He consulted with me and said, you know, is this a price that we can afford? I went back and looked at the budgetary figures. I looked at what we'd already ordered, what the anticipation of upfitting was, and I told him that I could afford that out of that budget. And obviously, as you see in that budget, we brought it in $15,300 or $400 under budget.
I'll be upfront and tell you, I didn't know that vehicle was for the sheriff. I would have not, I think I may even have made this motion. I would not have supported it knowing that. My position would be provide a vehicle, yes, and as one of the 9 commissioners here, it would be something more reasonably priced, like an Interceptor sedan, which is $10,000 less than what we paid for this. That's just my position on it. But again, and Mike knows my position anyway on most of these issues. I think we do need to change things. I think it's about transparency and accountability on the money, and I'm just not ready to vote on this today. Maybe if Mike can have things set up, and hopefully he can get Rick to help in that regard, maybe next month, but I'm not ready to vote for this now. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Do I have a motion? Does anybody have a motion to offer? Thank you. Okay, no motion. We'll move on to the next item, item C, 911 Center equipment upgrade.
Yes. We're looking to upgrade a component or platform of the 911 system. It's denoted as the brand of Airbus. No, we're not buying an airplane. Airbus is the owner and manufacturer of these systems. So essentially what we're looking to do is we're going to transition into the phase of receiving SMS text messages to 911. With the resolution that the Board of Commissioners made last year to switch our service provider from AT&T to PFN, Peninsula Fiber Networks, that's an actual fiber network that can receive a broad array of information to the 911 center, unlike our current 911 trunk provider. This gives us the componentry within the 911 system to receive those text messages, to essentially translate those text messages and then quantitate those or put those into the call queue. I don't want to lead you to believe that we're the first ones doing this. There are other counties that are receiving text messages. The difference and what we will be kind of voyaging into the frontier on is that all of these other counties or all these other providers who are using this, they're using a second-hand party to receive these text messages, decipher them, and then place them into the dispatch center. That doesn't really provide a very beneficial solution because it doesn't route into the call queue. So you pick up the phone, you call 911. As you are on that 911 call, it's going to populate into our system. The dispatcher or the operator sees there's a call pending. They begin to develop the call by talking with the caller, etc. With this platform here, the text messages will come in the same way. It'll pop in as a call queue. They can start to have dialogue, attempt to make voice contact with the caller, etc. These other systems that use second and third party handlers, they're essentially receiving a call from another call center saying, hey, we have this text message from this number asking for these things. That's not a very good arrangement here. So this is part of the module that we're looking for that was requested in the CIP plan for this year. It is coming out of 911 surcharge funds. There are adequate funds to support this, and this is going to be used in conjunction with the switch to PFN at the end of the year. So PFN is already making headway about switching our service provider. We need to have this in place in order to begin receiving those, and no, it won't be right at the end of the year when we begin receiving these because there's a number of things that need to be done, how to quantitate the messages, how to receive that type of information, etc. We budgeted or we requested $55,000. We have narrowed down the scope of our modules and what we need within the center to receive and kind of decipher these calls, and we're looking at a price of $47,022. It is a proprietary function, meaning it has to be this manufacturer to coordinate or work with our current system. We don't have any other providers or manufacturers out there who can supply the same option and give us the same functionality to seamlessly integrate it into the system.
I have a motion and support. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Passes unanimously. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Steve.
Chris, if I could ask you a question. We're all fully aware of what occurred on Case Road and the incident that happened out there with the 911 center. What did we learn from that, and what do we need to do in the future so we don't have an issue like that occur where we're constantly sending rescue vehicles to the wrong address?
Well, I can only talk on the outside of this. Obviously, I've been somewhat allocated to dealing with other issues. I am aware of...
Thank you for sharing then.
Thank you. I am aware of the situation, and essentially we have, I guess, a very unfortunate situation where we have two roads, two address numbers, all referred to as the same road, but in two different jurisdictions. By my recollection, this had come up a couple years ago. It was not adequately addressed. When the caller called, it did not verify in our system to be an address in Columbia Township being not a valid address. What we need to own and take responsibility for was the caller gave us certain information that should have been relayed to the first responders, and let the first responders make that call. That information was not relayed. We have to take ownership of that. Obviously, there's a number of issues there with the addressing. I don't know how you have two adjoining jurisdictions with the same road name and the same addresses, to the point where even the U.S. Post Office was, I defined this road with a different road name. That wasn't legitimate or wasn't, I guess, widely known. Either way, we've addressed this issue with Region 2, we've addressed it with the GIS map, and we've addressed it with the Township Board, who has taken action to rectify that on their end. On our end, we need to make sure that we're relaying all the information to the responding jurisdictions to let them make the decision, because they may have information on lay of the land type of situations where they, this may have denoted to them, oh, okay, I need to go check this address, or minimally divide and conquer role where we send assets to both addresses until they figure out which one it is. So there's a number of factors there, but ultimately at the end of the day, we need to take responsibility for that, and we need to do a better job in getting the information out.
So my question is, what did we learn from this? And your solutions is deploying assets to both problems, or possible problems, and going forward from there, let the people on the ground tell us where we're right and wrong.
Well, I think it's a three-tiered approach. Number one is fixing the GIS map, which is where all of our data and our CAD system is driven from. That's been done. The next issue is the clarification and correcting of the addresses through Region 2. That is currently being done. And then the last process is a different approach when we have these conflicting addresses that may actually exist in a couple different jurisdictions, and how we deploy assets to those, and then the information we provide over the radio to the first responders.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Follow up on that, Chris. See, I vaguely remember a few years back when we were made aware that the landlines were starting to disappear and people go more to cell phone calls. And there was a discussion about how if somebody called in an accident from outside our area, they don't really know where they're at, if they're going to be traveling through from Chicago. So we bought a program at the sheriff's office request. There might have been, Steve might not have been sheriff yet. It was a while back. And this program was supposed to identify the particular cell phone call in the location they were at within 100 yards.
So what you're referring to is, and it's not necessarily a program that we have, it's a capability of the system and a capability of the phone. What you're referring to is Phase 2 wireless. And what that does is it geo-identifies the location of the phone, assuming a couple things. Number one, assuming the phone has the capability. In this situation, it was a cell phone caller, and I do not know whether that phone had the capability or not. But number two, it requires something more than a 1X connection, right? So we've all been on our phones. We see that you go into 1X, you have no data coverage. You go into 3G, you have poor data coverage at best, and then obviously LTE. The speed of receiving that information to the 911 center is dependent on what that connection is. Also, about how it can triangulate the towers. I don't have that information, whether that information was present within this scenario or not. In some respects, it's kind of irrelevant because the caller had the information about where they were at, although that conflicted with some of the information that we have in our systems, which is what I spoke to the Chairman Jotwell about, is that should have been relayed and we should have indicated assets to both locations.
Okay, I was under the impression when we bought this system that it would tell where we're at, and the locations are probably 6 or 8 miles apart. Did the system that we have, did that fail us?
I don't know. I don't know whether that phone had the capability. I don't know whether that phone had the connection to relay that signal. And I don't know. So when you receive those Phase 2 wireless signals, it gives you a broad area of where it can be, right? It'll give you a range. If you're in the city, it'll give you blocks. If you're in a more rural area, it's going to give you a range of crossroads of where you might be. And then you can expect to find that phone, let's say plus or minus a half mile, maybe more, maybe less. So I don't have that information as to whether that was present in the call or not, but kind of like I said, it's in some respects it's irrelevant because the caller knew where they were, or had provided some information that should have triggered some interest to begin sending assets to multiple locations since we had multiple fire departments going.
Is there a better program for the cell phone calls? I mean, landline's going to disappear for long, probably. Is there a better program that the sheriff needs to pinpoint these calls? I mean, the one that we're talking about was probably 5-6 years ago. So do we need something better to find these 911, the 911 calls on a cell phone?
Well, it's not something that we have. All we're doing is receiving the signal from the wireless carrier and decoding that as to the latitude, and the longitude. And arguably, the carrier and FCC control this as far as what they're going to transmit and what they're going to receive. The FCC is currently working on, although I don't really see the application in our area, they're currently working on requirements for carriers to give I don't know what it's called, but you have latitude and longitude, which identifies your flat signal on a map, and then you have basically a different signal that can identify your height, like within a multi-story building. They're working on some of those things as far as requirements to wireless carriers. Obviously, the wireless carriers are fighting that to some degree, but they're trying to get those signals more accurate. All we're doing is receiving the data from the phone and transmitting and translating that information.
Could you find out? Just curious if there is something better we can use?
Yeah, absolutely.
In a situation like this? I mean, thankfully, nobody was injured, hurt, but it might never happen for 10 years. I don't know, maybe technology will be here by then, but I thought when we approved that service you're talking about on picking up where cell phones were at, I thought that would solve a situation like this. And maybe it was supposed to, and maybe it just didn't work properly, I don't know.
No, I mean,
We're 8 miles apart here, these two houses.
So I'll happily check on that, but the componentry and the information that we have is the receipt and the decoding of that information. We don't control what is transmitted, so there's nothing that's going to give us a better decoding of the signal, because all you're doing is taking latitude and longitude and plotting down a map and showing the operator where that is. So, but I will look into that issue.
But if we had the coordinates, it would have wouldn't that clearly defined it was here, not 8 miles over there? Wouldn't the
Again,
coordinates told us that?
I don't know whether that functionality was available on that phone, or if the phone had that kind of connection. But either way, the caller relayed relevant information that should have been put out there.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Appreciate your explanation.
If I may,
Yes.
to be clear, if it did have it on the phone,
Yes, if it identified a geolocation, absolutely.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chris.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it. Bye. Okay, moving on, we have our county treasurer report. Welcome, Madam Treasurer.
Good morning, all. Here's your phone, Chris. So hopefully you've had a chance to preview the report that I sent out February 27th, so it's just been under 2 weeks that you've had the information. It's an 18-page report. I'm not going to review all of it, but I'm just going to take some highlights like I do every year. And of course, if you've got questions on anything, I can answer them for you as well. So, I kind of look at data and numbers, and this report is chock full of that for you. Let's turn your attention to page 9, where it talks about the settlement. Every March 1st, the taxes that remain uncollected at the local units and at the city get turned over to the county treasurer's office for collection. So that's what the settlement process is, basically, in a nutshell. I just want to point out the trend that we've got that's happening over the past couple of years. If you look at the graph, you can see it's a downward trend, and normally that's a good thing, and I do think it is a good thing. That means that the taxpayers are paying their taxes at their local units rather than waiting till they get turned over to our office. But I will note here that this is also reflective that the total dollars in fees and interest will be less that the county treasurer's office receives. So just a note to point out. So you can see we're at 9,962 partials that came to us last March, and just over $9.7 million. So we are right now in the process of settlement, so I don't have current 2017 figures to provide you as of yet. Our settlement is a quite lengthy process. We've got all of the villages, all of the townships, and the city that turn over their data, and we don't just plunk it into our system and say we're good. We balance it out, we reconcile it, we make sure that it's balanced to the penny, that all of the collection efforts and disbursements that the locals have done is correct, so that when we input the information into our database and bring it over live, that it's current and accurate. So it usually is about a 30-day, 45-day process when we will turn over the data once we get it live, but it can take up to 45 days to get everybody live and current. So as far as the numbers for this year, I don't have them, but I would assume that it's going to follow that downward trend. The next item I'd like to talk about again is numbers for forfeiture. This is the first year in the tax collection process or cycle, and on page 11, you'll have the graph there that talks about the number of parcels, and this is actually a good number as well. We're seeing a slight downward trend. In 2017, we had 2,100 If you want to look at the dollars, it's in the chart just below. Numbers for you. Looking at the trends. Done since 2009. So page 14 then kind of highlights that. History. So 2002, I believe, was the first year that the county treasurer from beginning to current. And it's interesting to see that, economic situation that we have all gone through. I'm happy to report that that is now on a down 17, we were down 72 parcels from the year before. But that is definitely the foreclosure prevention efforts. Yes, Commissioner Duckham. I have those figures.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So every March, with the maps, the county map where it maps out all of the townships in the city, and it shows you the system, and those that are pending foreclosure. And as you we give taxpayers that additional business day to come in and take care of the tracking that will hopefully pay before that April. So there's no alarm there going off with me, at least. I think taxpayers are being able to pay their taxes more timely because less part
It means people have some money now and they're paying their taxes rather than putting on tomorrow's.
Karen, thank you again for the information that you gave me earlier. I just had a quick question. Properties that are in jeopardy of that April 2nd date, do you know what the $1 million still left in that fund?
Oh, there's much more than that.
Okay, well, I'm just curious how
There are still dollars available in the Step Forward Michigan program. As I talked in my document, that increase in foreclosures because people have been able to take advantage of that program. January and February, we talk about the availability of for 5 years and meet the other guidelines. You can get up to 30. Yes, the program is still active, is still available. There are dollars that are available. To get the word out, work with people, let them know of this option.
living in the home.
Yes.
Is the big thing.
And that is one of the guidelines of the Step Forward. To help people who have land contracts, because a lot of our people that though it's the family home, if it's not in their name, they can't get the assistance. Just to point out on page 15, the state has in 2017 was 8%, and that is compilation of I want to talk about dog licenses and passports.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
And you need furniture.
Put in the report, it turned out that I just wanted everyone to know that
Here, don't see Mike there, but yeah, it's below 75,000.
We have a motion and support. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same.
that came up earlier. Off a dashboard of a vehicle, it's really easy to transpose those things. To let folks go off on their own. And I think when there's a lot of county facilities that I don't deal with because they're dealt with other future to just remember that.
Mr. Chair. Benefit to that, again, is just one commissioner. I like the way that you used to report other things, but I just think we've lost count of how many vehicles we have in coming out of the fleet. It's hard to do when there's no VINs attached to it, and we always knew that. If the administrator sees it that way.
Basically, them all coming back through Rick. The challenge has been, again, resource. Those resources, and nor do I see us necessarily having those, so we need to get some synergy and be able to do more with less. But
Law enforcement, and instead of matching license plates and VIN
when vehicles are coming in, they're going out, what license plate is going to go on. True.
And if I got
Big
a license
trucks.
plate crossed, I get a ticket. It's important, it's difficult, it's hard matching up everything. I appreciate that. But anticipate maybe some of the problems that may have arose, and we just got to fix them, is my opinion.
And when you're cutting budgets year after year after year, as Dave can, to cut and maintain the service level that one wants to maintain. And we have to prioritize what service we're going to deliver, because we don't want to be less than in Michigan. We're going to continue to struggle with that for some time, I believe.
Vehicles that we may not necessarily need if we have extra vehicles we even have in a fleet or by department. How can we know what they need?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All carry forward budget amendments for our amounts that were in 2017. What has not been spent is carried forward to 2000.
Document. It's under equipment replacement fund, and then under equipment it says
Yes, it does. That was the proceeds from the sale of the land that we got from the state, and land purchase for economic development or other reasons.
okay, so it is an
2000, the money was received in 2017, and so we're carrying that forward.
only question I've got. Thank you, Jim.
Our actual year-to-date expenditures is 8.1. Looking back for 3 years, it's 2.4, so we're above the trends for the year. In the financial statements, there's two major fund. The total expenditures for that fund is on the last page of the hand. Noted is it's been requested that we have and I'd be happy to work with anyone on the board at fair market value mainly. However, even without looking at $67,600,000 available.
It seems so simple, it's easy to make a mistake. But I like to point out, when I make a mistake on a well, we didn't know it was happening. Now when we know it does, we have to fix it. It's an unintended consequence.